Today, we continue our journey through the dramatic plagues of Egypt, focusing on one that strikes not just the land or the livestock, but the very flesh of people themselves, the plague of boils. This moment in Scripture reminds us that God's judgment is not only external, affecting nations and economies, but also deeply personal. Boils and blisters covered the Egyptians from head to toe, a painful reminder that no one is beyond the reach of the Lord's hand. The book of Exodus tells us that Moses took handfuls of soot from a furnace, threw it into the air, and it became fine dust over all Egypt. From that dust, painful boils broke out on people and animals. The magicians who once tried to replicate God's power could not even stand before Moses, because they themselves were afflicted. Here we see a striking image. Those who claimed power apart from God were humbled, silenced, and broken by his judgment. But why boils? Why would God choose this form of affliction? Think about it. Boils and blisters are painful, visible, and humiliating. Unlike hunger or thirst, which can be hidden for a time, these sores were on the surface, impossible to conceal. God was making a statement. The pride of Egypt, its outward appearance of strength and superiority, was shattered by a visible sign of weakness. Here's where the twist comes in. Boils may look like a physical problem, but they point us to something deeper, the hidden infections of the heart. Just as a boil rises to the surface to reveal what is festering beneath the skin, so too do trials and afflictions in our lives reveal what lies within us. Affliction has a way of exposing pride, fear, bitterness, and even unbelief. Have you ever noticed that when you're under pressure, what's really in your heart tends to rise to the surface? When things are smooth, we can pretend, we can cover, we can smile. But when the fire of affliction comes, when life presses us hard, suddenly the truth comes out. That is what God was showing Egypt, and that is what he sometimes shows us. Now, here's another dimension. The soot that Moses threw into the air came from a furnace, likely the very furnaces where Israelites were forced to make bricks as slaves. The same tool of oppression was turned into an instrument of judgment. God used the symbol of Egypt's cruelty as the very source of their pain. That is poetic justice. And it is also a reminder to us that God does not overlook injustice. What others mean for harm, God can turn into a tool of his righteous judgment. Let's step back for a moment and think about our own lives. While we may not face boils on our skin, we do experience afflictions that feel just as raw and painful. Illness, anxiety, broken relationships, financial struggles. These personal boils remind us of our frailty and our desperate need for God's healing touch. The good news is that, unlike Pharaoh, we have an opportunity to respond with humility, to cry out to God, and to seek his mercy before our hearts grow too hard. Consider how Pharaoh responded. Even after this painful plague, his heart was hardened. Imagine that. Boils covering his skin, his magicians crumbling in weakness, his people crying out in agony, and yet he still refused to bow before God. That is the tragedy of pride. Pain should have softened his heart. Instead, it only revealed the stubbornness within. Here's where the story connects to us in a surprising way. Sometimes the very afflictions we despise are the tools God uses to lead us closer to him. Pain can either harden us or soften us. It can either drive us away from God in bitterness or draw us near in dependence. The same sun that melts the wax hardens the clay. The difference is the condition of the heart. So let me ask you, what boils has God allowed in your life? Maybe it's a lingering hardship, a personal failure, or a wound that feels humiliating. Could it be that God is using that very affliction to get your attention, to reveal what's really inside, to humble you so that he can heal you? Think about Job. He also suffered with painful boils, yet his response was very different from Pharaoh's. Job tore his robe, fell to the ground, and worshipped. Though confused and deeply grieved, he did not curse God. His affliction became the stage on which God revealed perseverance, faith, and ultimate restoration. Two men, both covered in boils, one hardened his heart against God. The other opened his heart in desperate worship. And here's the twist that brings it all together. In the New Testament, we see the ultimate reversal of affliction. On the cross, Jesus took our pain, our shame, and our judgment into his own body. The prophet Isaiah said, "By his wounds we are healed." Think about that. The Son of God bore the ultimate affliction so that we could be made whole. The boils of judgment that once exposed sin were ultimately placed upon him, and in exchange, we receive healing and mercy. That is the hope we carry. Our boils, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, do not have to end in despair. They can become testimonies of God's grace if we allow him to use them for his purpose. As we close, remember this. Boils and blisters were not just an ancient plague. They are a mirror of the personal afflictions we face today. They reveal the pride in our hearts, the fragility of our lives, and the justice of our God. But they also point us to the deeper truth that God is able to heal, restore, and transform even the most painful wounds into vessels of his glory. So the next time you find yourself in a season of affliction, don't just ask, "Why me?" Instead ask, "Lord, what are you revealing in me? What do you want me to see? And how can this affliction bring me closer to you?" Because at the end of the day, the greatest tragedy is not the pain itself. The greatest tragedy is missing the purpose behind it. And the greatest victory is not escaping affliction, but discovering God's presence in the midst of it. Boils and blisters remind us that God is not distant. He is deeply involved, shaping us, correcting us, and ultimately drawing us into his healing embrace. May we learn from Egypt's stubbornness, and instead choose Job's humility, so that even in our most painful moments, God's power and love shines through. Thanks for watching Faith Unfolded. Subscribe, share, and stay tuned.